Jacob always dreamed of moving his family to a quiet neighborhood where Ethan, his 12-year-old son, could grow up safely. When they finally bought their little house in Lakewood Meadows, it seemed perfect. Streets were lined with maple trees, every lawn was cut to the same height, and mailboxes stood in neat rows. But almost immediately, Jacob noticed something strange. Every evening, a black SUV crept along the streets, moving slower than normal. Inside sat Mr. Carter, a man in his 50s with steel-gray hair, a hard jawline, and sharp eyes that scanned every detail like a hawk. Neighbors whispered about him, lowering their voices whenever he passed. To Jacob, it felt less like a neighborhood watch and more like surveillance. Within a week of moving in, Carter introduced himself. He wasn't warm. He wasn't neighborly. Standing tall in his tactical boots and black vest labeled security, he extended a stiff handshake to Jacob. "You're new here," Carter said flatly. "I'm the HOA cop. I keep this neighborhood in order." Jacob forced a polite smile. "HOA cop? Didn't know that was a thing." Carter's lips twitched. "Not official, but necessary. People here respect me because I make sure rules are followed." Laura, standing on the porch, whispered to Jacob later that night, "He doesn't seem like a neighbor. He seems like a warden." A few evenings later, Jacob and Ethan came back from the grocery store. Carter waved his SUV flashlight at them like it was a traffic stop. "Your boy shouldn't be out this late," Carter barked. Jacob frowned. "It's 8:15. He's just riding his bike." Carter tapped the thick binder resting on his passenger seat. "HOA rules, Section 4.2. Children may not be on streets after 8 p.m. Curfew is curfew." Jacob sighed. "We'll keep that in mind." But as they walked inside, Ethan asked quietly, "Dad, why does he watch us like that?" "Did I do something wrong?" Jacob ruffled his son's hair. "No, buddy. Some people just like power too much." Ethan was a cheerful kid who loved basketball, bikes, and laughing until his stomach hurt. But his happiness seemed to irritate Carter. One sunny afternoon, Ethan's basketball bounced off the driveway and rolled near Carter's mailbox. Ethan jogged after it, only to be stopped by Carter storming out of his house. "That's vandalism," Carter barked, snatching the ball. Ethan's cheeks flushed red. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean excuses don't fix damage." Carter's grip on the ball tightened as if it were evidence. Jacob, watching from the porch, shouted back, "Hey, he's just a kid. Give him his ball back!" Carter glared at Jacob, then tossed the ball hard onto the ground. The bounce echoed like a warning shot. The next morning, Jacob marched to Carter's driveway. "Listen, my son didn't vandalize anything. He's just a boy playing ball." Carter leaned casually against his SUV, crossing his arms. "Your son better learn boundaries. Break rules here and there are consequences. Threatening kids now? That's your idea of keeping order?" Jacob shot back. Carter's cold smile didn't fade. "Sometimes discipline is the only language people understand." Jacob walked away, blood boiling, but also unsettled. This wasn't just about rules. Carter thrived on intimidation. At the monthly HOA meeting in the community hall, Carter was front and center. Wearing his black vest like a uniform, he stood up and demanded, "We need stricter enforcement. Children running loose after dark is a liability. Basketball hoops? Noise violations? Bikes left outside? Code violations." Murmurs filled the room. Some parents shifted uncomfortably. Others looked down, unwilling to challenge him. Jacob raised his hand. "These are kids, not criminals. You can't keep treating them like threats." Carter's icy stare cut across the room. "If rules aren't enforced, this neighborhood will fall apart." The board, spineless as ever, nodded. Jacob realized Carter had them wrapped around his finger. Word spread quickly. Some neighbors whispered that Carter used to be a cop. Others claimed he had connections with federal law enforcement. Nobody knew for sure, and Carter never clarified. Instead, he encouraged the rumors by acting secretive, flashing what looked like a badge now and then, muttering about operations and keeping order. Jacob's gut told him something was wrong. Real officers didn't act like bullies in cul-de-sacs. It was a warm summer night. Laura watered her roses. Jacob hammered a loose mailbox post. Ethan dribbled his basketball in the driveway, humming happily. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue. Then, tires screeched. Carter's black SUV swerved to a halt in front of their house. The sound was so loud it made Laura drop her watering can. Dust rose in a cloud, swallowing the quiet evening. Carter jumped out, his hand already on his vest. His face was red, his eyes sharp and unblinking. Neighbors peeked out from windows. Some stepped onto porches, sensing trouble. In one fluid motion, Carter yanked a handgun from under his vest. He aimed it directly at Ethan. "Drop the ball! You're trespassing!" Carter's voice cracked through the air like a thunderclap. Ethan froze. His hands trembled, the basketball slipping from his fingers and thudding onto the driveway. Laura screamed. "He's just a child!" She ran toward her son. Jacob bolted forward, wrapping his arms around Ethan, shielding him with his own body. His heart pounded in his ears. Neighbors gasped. Some yelled, "Put the gun down!" Others whipped out phones, recording. The silence of suburbia had shattered into chaos. For a long moment, the world stood still. Carter's finger hovered over the trigger, his breath ragged. Jacob's arms tightened around Ethan, bracing for the unthinkable. Then Carter lowered the gun slightly. His free hand reached into his jacket. He pulled out a shiny badge and held it high. "Federal Marshal," he barked. "Don't question my authority." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors froze in fear. Others muttered, "Is that real?" Ethan sobbed into Jacob's chest. Laura's knees buckled, and Jacob, staring at that badge, felt a chill crawl down his spine. Something about it looked wrong. The nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. Neighbors whispered in disbelief. Some backed away, clutching their children. Others whispered, maybe he really is a marshal. Jacob wasn't convinced. Real law enforcement officers didn't aim guns at kids for bouncing basketballs. He glanced at Laura, who whispered, "That badge looked fake." Carter shoved the badge back into his vest and growled, "I don't need an audience. This neighborhood is under my protection. Anyone who breaks rules answers to me." Jacob's jaw tightened. His gut screamed, this man wasn't who he said he was. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed at the end of the street. Local police cruisers pulled up, sirens wailing. Someone had called 911. Carter didn't flinch. Instead, he holstered his gun calmly, as if he had nothing to fear. When officers stepped out, Carter greeted them with a smirk. "Stand down, officers." Federal Marshal Carter working undercover. He flashed his badge again. The officers hesitated. They looked at each other, uncertain. Was he telling the truth? Jacob stepped forward, shouting, "He pointed a gun at my son! Arrest him!" But Carter's confident voice cut through. "He's exaggerating. I had to intervene before the boy damaged property. I'm authorized." That night, the house was silent. Ethan sat on his bed, clutching his basketball like a shield. His small hands shook. "Dad, I thought I was going to die." His voice cracked, eyes wide with fear. Jacob sat beside him, pulling him close. "You're safe now, buddy. I promise I'll never let him hurt you." But inside, Jacob burned with guilt. He had moved his family to this neighborhood for peace. Instead, his son had a gun pointed at him. The next morning, Jacob called his old college friend Mike, who worked in law enforcement. "Mike, I need your help. A man here is claiming to be a U.S. Marshal. He pointed a gun at my kid." Mike asked for details about the badge. Jacob described it carefully. The shiny emblem, the lettering. There was a long pause on the phone. Then Mike said, "Jacob, from what you're describing, that sounds like a novelty badge. Real marshals don't act like that. And they definitely don't enforce HOA rules." Jacob's suspicions hardened into determination. The neighborhood quickly split into two camps. Some defended Carter. "He keeps us safe. He's the only reason this place is so quiet." Others were horrified. "Pointing a gun at a child is unforgivable." At the next HOA meeting, voices clashed. Jacob demanded action, but the board remained silent. Carter sat in the front row, arms crossed, a smug smirk on his face, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Jacob couldn't sleep. He spent nights digging through public records online. After hours of searching, he found something. Carter had applied to become a federal marshal years ago. His application was rejected. Instead, Carter had worked for a private security company, until even that job ended badly. Jacob leaned back in his chair, fists clenched. "So that's it. He's not a marshal. He's a fraud." Jacob started gathering evidence. He took screenshots of Carter's old records. He collected neighbors' videos showing Carter pointing the gun. He even photographed the badge Carter carried. It was a cheap replica, sold online for under $50. Every piece of proof added fuel to Jacob's resolve. He wasn't just protecting his son anymore. He was protecting the entire neighborhood. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. Everyone knew tensions were boiling. Jacob stood up, holding a folder thick with papers. His voice rang clear. "This man is not who he says he is. He is not a federal marshal. He is a fraud." He laid out the evidence, records, photos, witness accounts. Murmurs filled the room. Neighbors gasped. Carter's face turned pale. "This is slander," he barked, slamming his fist on the table, but Jacob didn't back down. Pointing a gun at a child is not law enforcement. It's a crime. The very next morning, sirens filled the street again. But this time, they weren't for Jacob's family. A convoy of police cruisers, accompanied by actual U.S. Marshals, pulled up to Carter's house. Officers surrounded the property. Carter tried to bluff one last time, flashing his badge. But the real marshal in charge stepped forward unimpressed. "That's fake. You're under arrest for impersonating a federal officer and for endangering a child." Neighbors watched from their porches as Carter was handcuffed and taken away, shouting protests no one believed. For the first time in weeks, Lakewood Meadows felt peaceful. Kids rode bikes freely. Parents smiled again. Ethan slowly regained his courage. He dribbled his basketball again in the driveway, though he still glanced at the street nervously. Jacob placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You're safe now, son. The truth always wins, even when it feels like fear is stronger." Laura hugged them both, whispering, "We're finally home." And in that moment, Jacob knew no HOA bully, no fake badge, no intimidation could ever defeat the power of truth, family, and courage.